Hello the internet and welcome back to my channel. It's mail day again today. I've got some parcels from some of my viewers and hopefully there's something that we can use for some of my projects or something to repair. So stay tuned. We're going to open all these 3 parcels and see what's inside. I might know what's inside some of them, but not the whole of the content. So it's going to be a surprise for me as well. Now, I've been calling these episodes Tony Got Mail. Should be number 3. I'm not too convinced about the name, so if you have a better idea for, like a serious name for this episode, just do leave a comment down below. I'm looking forward to reading what you have in mind. We have 3 parcels here today. This big one comes from London in the UK, from Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. I believe he sent me a motherboard to take a look at because he can't get it work. So we'll take a look and see what we can do about it. We have this black one is coming from Poland, from my viewer Sobi Robi. They left a comment on one of my previous videos, the Shuttle 591p motherboard. And they basically said, if you can fix the motherboard, I'll send you something. So I believe this is the price for me fixing the board. But they also said there's something else inside the parcel, so I don't know exactly what's inside it. And this one comes from Canada, from user Mockingbird. And Mockingbird sent me already something, and particularly that very Shuttle 591p and the ATA motherboard, which I still have to fix. I'm not sure what's inside, and we'll take a look together. So enough me talking, and let's start opening the parcels and see what's inside. Now, I think I'm going to begin with this larger box, again coming from London, from Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. Before I start opening this box, let me thank PCBWay for sponsoring this video. PCBWay manufacture PCB prototyping for all your needs. If you have a project that you have developed or something you found on the internet and you would like the PCB manufactured, PCBWay is the way to go. The website is very easy to use. You just need to upload your Gerber files, tweak some parameters if you want, select the manufacturing turnover, select the postal service that you would like to use, and you are ready to go. I have used PCBWay for a couple of my projects, one being the XT-IDE and one being the PS2 floppy adapter. I have to admit the manufacturing quality is absolutely excellent, so I do recommend them for all your projects. Thank you very much PCBWay for sponsoring this video and helping the channel, and now let's go on and open this box. Oh wow. Go round. So heatsink, there's a CPU on it. Alright, so according to Adrian, this is an Acer V58. Apparently he asked on Vogons already and they helped him identify the motherboard, so I googled for the Acer V58 and there's no picture, but the layout of the motherboard seems to be this one. Also it says V58 here and it says V58 on the BIOS IC, so that sounds like an Acer V58. It doesn't say Acer anywhere on the board. I suspect maybe Acer rebranded another motherboard, even though I can see that this was only known as Acer motherboard, so I don't know. But anyways, we got a CPU under this nice heatsink, and apparently that could be a Pentium 233 MMX, because there's a little... Adrian printed the manual for me, thank you Adrian, and it says Pentium 233. There's a RAM module here taped on the PCI slots, so it says 32 megabyte, so I got some RAM to test it. The motherboard is based on the ALI or Ali, which is also the Aladdin 4 Plus, which is M1531, M1543, the 2 ICs here. We got some cache here, we got 3 ISA slots, 4 PCIs. It's interesting, this is an AT only motherboard. It's kind of weird, usually the Pentium motherboards are dual AT, ATX, so this is only AT. But on the other end, this motherboard only has 168 pins memory slots and not the 62 ones. So it's kind of weird. Now I took a look at this motherboard. I don't see anything like visually broken or wrong. The only thing I can see in here, there is a little jumper, but it's nicely made. It's got some Kapton tape around it. So I suspect this could actually be factory. Now, Adrian explained me that he purchased this motherboard on eBay as faulty and he tested it and basically the CPU is getting warm and apparently the motherboard never gets out of the reset cycle, so maybe we can test it. Alright, so the first step is to make sure the board is correctly configured for the CPU. Now the CPU here says Intel Pentium i200. Let's see what it says at the back. And it looks like, obviously, is a 200 MHz CPU. I see an SY045 code. And I had a look online, and this is the fastest vanilla CPU, which is like the plain one single voltage CPU. So that's 66 megahertz FSP, 3 times the multiplier, and the 3.3 volts voltage, which is the same for the V-core and the I/O voltage. Now I see these jumpers here are correctly set for 66 megahertz operations, and the multiplier here is correctly set for ×3. However, this jumper here is set for the dual voltage operation, and the voltage for the V-core is set to 2.8. Now, as I said, this is a single voltage 3.3 volts, so that should be set on a single voltage, and at that point this doesn't really matter. So that's definitely not going to work with this CPU unless it's irrelevant for whatever reason, but we will have to change that one. Well, the basic stuff is ready, so I would say let's plug this thing and see what it does. Okay, well, I've got a post card, I've got the video card, we've got some RAM, and I'm keeping a finger on the CPU to make sure it doesn't burn. And I would say, let's give it a go. In 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, well, as Adrian said, I can see the board never comes out of reset because the reset light is switched on all the time. The CPU is getting warm and there's no codes whatsoever, which means the CPU is not doing anything. That's a bit surprising that it's still getting hot, but there's no activity whatsoever. Well, first thing first, let's check at the back of the board whether we have the right voltage and the right frequency for the CPU. Okay, well, I'm on V-core, which should be 3.3 volts. Let's turn it on now. No, it's 2.8. That's weird. What about the I/O? It's still 2.8. Not sure what's going on here, because it's set to single voltage, and it should do 3.3. And I've looked into this thing a little bit, and it turns out that on this board, when you select single voltage, the voltage is selectable, and it's the V-core that becomes the only voltage for the whole CPU. So obviously, I left the jumper on the V-core on 2.8, and 2.8 became the only voltage for the whole V-core and I/O. So I have to change it to 7 and 8, position 7 and 8, and that should give 3.3 volts to both. I guess this makes sense, as this way they're using the strongest section of the voltage generation circuitry here on the board, which to me it's pretty interesting. I'll show it to you in a minute. But now let's check again the voltage. It should be 3.3 volts. Okay, I'm back on V-core. Let's see what we got now. And we have 3.5, which is, I think, it's what is expected for a CPU like this. What do we have on I/O? We have 3.5, which is great. Now let's check the clock and make sure that we have 66 megahertz going into this CPU. Yeah, you can see top right it says 66.6 megahertz, so that is great. But as we noticed, I think the reset line, which should be this one, it never resets, it never goes back to low, which means it's not active. So obviously, if the reset line doesn't go away, there's no point in checking anything. We need to understand why that reset line is not going away, which is what Adrian told me. You know, the reset line doesn't reset, basically, doesn't go away. Okay, I've been looking into this a bit, and there's a jumper that caught my attention, and I don't really understand what it means. It's this jumper here, and on the manual it says it's the power supply, and it can be traditional or resume. And I don't know what that means. Sounds like resume could be an ATX, but this board doesn't have an ATX connector, so it's always going to be an AT power supply. AT power supplies are, what does that mean, AT and resume? And I didn't think too much about it until I realized there is a resume power connector on the board. And because the board is set to resume, I thought, what if when it's set to resume, the board is waiting for something coming through this connector to actually start the processor, which could be like that reset line that never goes away. So I think I'd like to try and move this jumper into the traditional position, don't ask me what that means, and see if that by any chance makes any difference whatsoever. Alright, let's see whether we get any activity whatsoever. I really doubt it, but let's try. 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, look at that. Well, the reset is working now. The reset has gone away, but this is still not working. This is so weird. And the CPU is getting warm. Okay, I would say the next step would be to try another CPU, maybe another memory module. I mean, it would beep if the memory was faulty. Actually, we can try that. If I remove the RAM and I power on, what happens? nothing. And there is a beeper on the board, so it's not even doing that. You would have some codes even with no RAM as well. It would say something, as in some code has been executed. So I would say let's try a different CPU just in case this one is no good. I'm assuming Adrian tested that already, but I'll just test it real quick. And for this, I'm going to use my Pentium 233, which is a dual voltage CPU, so I'll have to change the jumpers. Okay, I'm ready to test. I got 2.8 volts as the V-core, and I changed the multiplier from 3 times 3 to times 3.5, which is 65 times 3.5 is 233. So let's give it a go. In 3, 2, 1, go. Still not working, and the CPU is getting warm. Not horribly warm, but yeah, it is doing something. I would say let's double check at the back that everything is in order, and then I'm not sure, to be honest. Okay, let's check V-core first. It should be 2.8, and it is. Now let's check that the I/O voltage is 3.3, and it is. Perfect. And we should see the same. I haven't changed the clock, so it should be unchanged at 66. And it is 66.6. Now let's check whether the reset line now works, as the postcard seems to be suggesting. Yes, you can see the reset goes up for a moment, and then it goes down low after just a split second. So that's how it's supposed to work. Okay, well, the reason why we fixed the the reset line problem, but there is another problem somewhere. Now I'm now probing the BIOS address lines, and this is one of the lines, and it's completely dead. It's stuck to 5 volts and it's not doing anything. And if I'm checking another address line, again, not doing anything whatsoever. Another address line, not doing anything. If I'm going to check the data lines, I'm getting this, which is 1.5 volts. It looks like it's floating, or there's some kind of a conflict somewhere. I wouldn't expect to see 1.5. I would expect, either 0 or 5. 1.5 is a bit suspicious. The thing is, I've been checking all the data lines that are all like this. Now let me show you this voltage generation circuitry, because I find it pretty interesting. The main IC is disintegrated here, and it says SC1134CT. This is an interesting IC I never encountered before, and it basically delivers 5 volts through a linear regulation, which are pretty good, but they're very inefficient. Usually they make quite a lot of heat, so you can't really use 5 volts for much on a motherboard like this. But there is another section of the same IC, so there is one of the legs, it's actually the controller for the 2 transistors which are attached at the heatsink here at the back. So this IC on the same package is delivering 5 volts regulated for whatever it needs. I guess that could be the I/O output, which probably doesn't take too much current, but it's also driving the transistors here at the back, I think the MOSFETs, for the V-core generation. So through the jumper selection here, this IC is then driving 2 MOSFETs or 2 transistors that eventually drive the processor at higher current. And I find this pretty interesting. There's a very nice heatsink. I like the idea that on one single IC, they managed to squeeze the voltage regulator, the linear voltage regulator, but also the driving for external transistor. I think that's pretty clever. Now on this motherboard I see there is a mention of this HWM VIO and HWM V-core, and looking at the manual, that's the hardware monitor voltage IO and hardware monitor voltage core. I understand, but I'm not sure, the manual is not very clear, that there is a hardware monitor module that you can attach to this board, and by selecting the correct voltage through these jumpers, you are telling the hardware board what voltages to expect for the I/O and for the CPU. But to be honest, I'm not sure, so if you know anything about these things, that'd be great. And this here seems to be where the hardware monitor is attaching. But again, the manual is very unclear, there's very little information about it. There is a jumper here. If I remove the jumper, when I power up the motherboard, this LED, which is HWM era, it lights up. So I'm assuming that this is just like an external sensing facility for something that you connect to here, and you're instructing this board to look for those voltages. And if some of these voltages are not correct, then the LED is lighting up. I don't know. If you know anything about this, just leave a comment down below. I'd be really curious to know what this thing is, because I have no idea. Okay, well, let's move to the next board, which is the one coming from Poland. Let's take a look what's inside. Lamberg. It's nice, it has a tape measure at the back. This is quite nice, actually good material. I'm curious to see what this Lamberg is. And I've taken a look, and it looks like Lamberg is a shop where you can buy networking equipment, including their own branded switches. I never heard of this brand. I'm not sure whether they're rebranded or not, but that's pretty nice. What have we got here? Oh, nice. We got some sweets. The first time I got some sweets. Very, very nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sure these are going to be amazing. And we have... Oh, these are the memory sockets I needed. Oh, look at that. Thank you for that. That's the surprise he mentioned. These are brand new memory sockets. Look at that. Perfect. That's what I needed. And here I think I have my price, which is the AMD K6 II. I never had one of these. This is a very nice little container for it. Wow, look at that. This is a proper AMD K6 II 500 AFX. Wow, look at this thing. It's brand new. I think it's brand new, but it looks unused. So maybe we can test this thing on the shuttle motherboard. Why not? And maybe on this video we can also replace the sockets. Why not? So at least we have a fully working motherboard. Thank you so much for this. It's really appreciated. I'm going to sample these sweets. I think I know how they're gonna taste. We call them moo in Italian. I don't know why they call them moo, but that's how we call them. Pretty nice. Thanks again. Thanks for the lanyard. It's pretty nice. I would say before I start playing with the motherboard, let's open the other parcel, see what's in it. You never know, there's something that I can use and I can test on a motherboard, and maybe we can give it a go as well. Again, this is coming from Canada, from Mockingbird, who is the gentleman who sent me the motherboard. So obviously thanks for that. Because would you guess what? Mockingbird sent me the DIMM module, the DIMM sockets. So now I have two of them, four actually, and they are slightly different. And here we have, I think, some CPUs. So the first CPU, would you guess it? It's an AMD K6 II 500. It looks like they're more or less identical. I think they're slightly different. One is 80K, one is AFX. One is 2.1 volt and one is 2.2. I don't know what the difference is. I can take a look, but I think it's the same CPU, just a different revision. Ooh, okay. So according to the letter I got, this is a K6 II Plus 533 modified to K6 III Plus. And I think in order to do that, you have to delete it, because you have to do some soldering or something on it. So this is a K6 II Plus 533. This is untested. I'm assuming you just move those components around and the CPU is being recognized as a different one. Well, I would say thank you both. This is amazing. I feel a bit guilty that you ended up sending me similar things from different countries, and especially now the UK is not in Europe anymore. You know, it's not as easy as it used to be, unfortunately. But this is absolutely amazing. I think this is, you know, I'm not used to receiving this thing, so thank you very much. It warms my heart. It's really good to see that. I would say now what I can do, we can test the CPUs, including the modded one, see how they works. Maybe I can do a quick benchmark before with my Pentium 233 and see what's going to happen with one of these CPUs when they're working. And then, why not, I would say let's replace the SIM sockets, which might not be an easy task being a motherboard with those multi-layers and lots of ground planes. But let me get out the shuttle motherboard and we can test the CPUs together. I tested all the CPUs and they all worked perfectly fine. For the modded K6 III 533, I could not select 533 as a working frequency because the board can do 95 MHz times 5.5, which is 523 MHz, or 100 MHz times 5.5, which is 550 MHz. I am told that 550 MHz for this CPU is perfectly fine, but I haven't tested extensively. I'm sure the internet is plenty of benchmarks, so I'll be quick. I tested all 4 CPUs with the usual tests. The K63 was tested at both 523 and 550 MHz. SpeedSys, which is more likely to show the pure processing power, shows a massive improvement which goes from 224% to 257%. Similarly, Landmark shows gains between 184% and 212%. 3D Benchmark, which is likely also affected by the video card, shows that the AMD processors are between 129 and 152% faster, while PC Player puts the Santa Clara's company ahead of Intel up to a staggering 126%. Real-world games are less enthusiastic, but still show impressive improvements. Doom increases its frame rate up to 26% and Quake up to 99%. Particularly in 2023, when getting a double-digit improvement in the CPU world is a big event, seeing those numbers on the same socket is mind-blowing. Right, so everything works totally fine. I am so impressed by the performance of these CPUs. Thank you, Sobirobi and Mockingbird, for sending me these CPUs. I'm sorry you ended up sending me the same things at the same time, but as I said, I haven't got AMD K6 CPUs, so I will make sure that these are going to be used properly. One of these CPUs definitely ending up in my main computer. Thank you so much. Now, as a final step for this video, I would say I can try and replace these memory modules. Now, being a motherboard is not going to be easy. I hope it's not going to be too complicated. If you watched some of my previous videos, the living control in particular, that was a nightmare just to replace a bunch of capacitors. So these have many legs, and I'm hoping it's not going to be as complicated. But the board will end up on a preheater, because I will need to preheat the board at around 150 degrees, and then I'll use some hot air, and also hopefully my desoldering gun is going to be enough. Otherwise it's going to be complicated, but finger crossed it's going to be doable. So let's get the preheater out and let's get to it. The first step is to preheat the board to about 150 degrees Celsius. Then I applied some fresh solder to the joints. This is a pre-2000 board, so the solder is not lead-free, but it's always a good idea to apply fresh solder to help with the desoldering process. After that, the long and tedious job of desoldering 336 pins. Thankfully, my desoldering gun was perfectly capable of doing that, and I did not experience any issues due to ground planes. Each hole cleared up nicely with no efforts. Finally, I applied some flux to help with the socket removal, and I used some hot air to detach the sockets. The first one came out pretty easily, the second one took a bit longer and left some legs behind, which I had to remove manually. As the process was surprisingly easy and all the holes were clear, I decided to take advantage of the board being already hot and install the new sockets straight away. They fitted perfectly, and it was just a matter of soldering those 336 pins again. When I went to test the board, I was greeted by a very saddening error beep. However, joy replaced sadness when I noticed the inevitable one pin out of 336 I had forgotten to solder. After that was done, the board booted fine and it was recognizing the whole set of RAM. What a relief. Right, so the board works 100%, everything went totally fine, and the board is now 100%. Is it? It's not, I'm afraid. Some things happened during the process, and I have to admit that I feel a bit embarrassed to share this with you, but in the end, the purpose of this channel is not to hide my mistakes. I'd rather share them so you can see them, you can learn, you can suggest, recommend, comment, and laugh at it if you want. So what happened during the process is I used my preheater, obviously, and I set the preheater to a temperature which I know will take the PCB to about 150 degrees. I use that temperature for my PlayStations, whenever I'm doing some BGA reworking or reballing or something. Now, the thing is, when I use that temperature, I have all the components facing up. And at some point, as you saw in the video, I turned the board upside down because I had to work on the other side. And I didn't realize that by doing that, some of the components were going to be much closer to the heating elements, to the point where the temperature reached in those areas was much higher than I wanted. So the temperature went a bit too high and this happened. Yes, I've melted the ISA slots. Now, the slots are actually working because I realized when it was not too late. And I've also had to replace a few capacitors, because they just reached the temperature which was too high, so they swell up a bit. And you can't understand how awful I feel, because some of you went the extra mile to send me spare parts to make this board perfect, and I've almost destroyed it. So I feel horrible. Now, the board works, and thankfully there's no further damage. So I don't see any other damage on the board. That being said, I don't feel comfortable in leaving the board like this, because the point was to make this board 100%, and I fixed the memory slots and I broke the ISA slots. So I went ahead and I found online some brand new ISA slots at a reasonable price, by the way. I got 4 of them. One is going to be a spare, because one of my future projects is going to be to create an ISA riser, as in I'd like to be able to repair a board on my bench. So to have, that, like those PCI Express risers, something like that, but in ISA format. So what I'm going to do now, carefully this time, is I'm gonna remove the ISA sockets from the board, and I'll have to use the preheater, so I'll have to be careful, and I'll install this too. And wish me luck. Swapping the ISA slots was not different than swapping the RAM sockets, and as before, I didn't experience issues with ground planes. This time though, instead of using hot air to detach the slots, I wiggled all the pins with a flat screwdriver to detach the small solder residues left in the holes. Surprisingly, that worked perfectly. The slots were loose with no further action, and I just needed to wiggle them out. The PCB wasn't damaged, and fitting new connectors was just painless. Okay, it's almost the moment of truth. Something I've noticed is that I have replaced these winning slots with very good quality AMP sockets. These are pretty good quality. So shall I say that this whole process has been intentional and this does qualify as an upgrade to the motherboard? Or maybe I'm just trying to hide my clumsiness. Right, okay. The board is ready to go. I just need to fit an ISA video card. There you go. First time in the socket. And I guess I'm ready to go. In 3, 2, 1, go. Didn't like it. Nothing at all. Aha! It's booting! Woof! I fixed it. Cool. Right, okay, there's no hard drive, so obviously it's not going anywhere. I would say let's test all those 3 slots, okay? Just in case I forgot to solder another pin. Second slot is okay. Woof! And third slot is okay. Right, finally! No more soldering on this motherboard. Woof! Feels so much better now. Here we go, we've reached the end of the video. We have the board running, and I have selected an ISA video card just because, well, apparently this board has had an ISA upgrade, so I just wanted to finish the video showcasing the board with an ISA card, which is very slow, and this is why I have selected the slow game rather than anything else. I think I'm going to use this board for my own build, replacing the Intel TX, which I understand, well, number one, it doesn't have an AGP slot, and number two, I understand the Intel TX cannot cache the whole 128 megabyte of memory that I installed, while the Shuttle 591P can. I'm now feel a bit attached to this board. I'm not going to use my other one, which was a simpler repair if I remember right. This one, again, I almost killed it, so I really would like to have this in my build. And I've also ended up with some spares here. I've got 3 melted ISA slots, which are still working, so can be okay for a project. And I have 4 RAM sockets, 2 are brand new and 2 are kind of broken but still working, so it could be recycled for something. Let me thank again my viewers who sent me items. That always appreciate it. Thank you very much, Adrian, for sending me that motherboard. I'll see what I can do in a future video. Thank you very much, Mockingbird, and also David from Sobirobi. And I understand that Sobirobi is actually a YouTube channel. If you are into constructions, I would recommend you go and watch Sobirobi's channel. I understand it is David's journey into refurbishing his own property. It looks amazing, quite a lot of videos, and David, I hope you can finish and refurbish the property as soon as possible and end up with your dream place. I think this is really it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me almost destroying this motherboard. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumb up down below. And also, if you like seeing people destroy motherboards, please subscribe to this channel, because I'm sure this is not going to be the last one. For now, thanks for watching. I wish you a great day, and I hope to see you again here soon on my channel for my next videos. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Bye-bye.